Dawn. So I'm wondering, well, okay, you're shaking your head.
The
Maybe you disagree with
party
this
line is 2024, so.
Okay. Sorry, but still, longer than the 2019. And so I guess I'm also wondering, is the expectation that Kaggle will be online first, and by the time, or is it going to be a longer?
Well, Kaggl's already locked their simple Michelson degree of freedom, right? So
they are nowhere near the sensitivity that we require in order to do joint observations and to impact what we need, right? Which has to be a factor of 3 or maybe a factor of 4 at worst than the other detectors in the network.
That's true, but they at least have,
maybe 2020, 2021, we don't know.
but they at least have the infrastructure built. They have the beam tubes.
They're funding itself.
Yes, that's true.
Maybe I should not comment.
They have a crazy
should have lots of
schedule
people, but I can tell you.
for-
Tony, you had a question?
Yeah.
So I think that it is very unlikely in the extreme that LSST would break its multiple surveys that we are required to do by the scientific community to do a target of opportunity search unless the likelihood of it being real is very, very high. Okay? Because this would compete with the 1% remaining observing time beyond the surveys, which is a few nights a year, which isn't bad. So my question is it would be really nice to see a realistic estimate of the false alarm rate as a function of threshold.
Well,
I'll
we
show
understand that.
tomorrow.
Oh, good. So very
Yeah.
okay. You're going to show that.
But that's very encouraging, actually. The false alarms go like mad.
Yeah.
down.
It's exponential.
Yeah.
Right, and maybe Barry will show just this, but I mean, in the mode that we're producing alerts here with a deliberately loose false alarm rate, but
Yeah, we're putting them out loose just to do
Sure,
it.
sure. You
yeah,
want to do that.
but
You'll see the graph. It's just
Yeah.
amazing.
It's phenomenal.
you don't have to move it too much until they're highly, very well established. And in rate-wise,
It's not a big
more
loss
than
in rate.
not more than half of them would
Yeah.
be very well established. I mean, of a real population.
And the
Yeah.
false alarm rate is one thing, but the sky localization is the other one, right? You want to point at the right direction. And so Hsin-Yu is working on, how many events are actually going to be very, very well localized. So maybe even one pointing is enough.
Yes, so it's going to depend on the population. It's not the same question, but it's going to depend on how many detection, how many
Could you
detection we're
repeat
going
the
to have,
question?
and do we need a selection for that?
Would you repeat the question?
It's just
So I just suggested that the false alarm rate has two parts: the actual false alarm rate and how big the sky area is that you localize your source. If it's too big, then that's an extra uncertainty. And so what Hsin-Yu is working on is how well you can localize some events.
I guess I feel like it's a strange question because our false alarm rate is the thing on which we place the threshold, right? I mean, if you want to, if you say, well, with LSST, I want to make sure that, once in 100 years, I don't follow up a false alarm more than once in 100 years, then you just say, I take all of the events that have a false alarm rate of less than 1 per 100 years, and I consider scheduling those.
Yeah, if I try to repeat this just a little bit better, we actually measure the false alarm rates very well. So if we tell you 1 per 100 years,
I always get killed by tails of distributions. So knowing experimentally what the rate is.
we can tell you 1 per 100 years.
So do you think this kind of information will be useful for astronomers? Because within the LIGO scientific collaboration, we are planning to release another version of the so-called observing scenarios document. And at least some of us feel that this false alarm rate might be useful, but other colleagues strongly disagree. So is that useful information for you?
They are real astrophysical objects.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very useful, absolutely. And I think it would be really good to work together and understand these distributions. But, by the way, I think that we have to be talking about at least 90% error circles.
Yeah, that's what we do. All our errors are 90% critical difference.
I have two different issues. One is about this target of opportunity in the LSST. If you're just scanning the sky, why does it matter to you to look at a different point of the sky than the one that you're planning to look anyway?
That's a very good question. The main
From this point of
surveys-
view, you're not losing anything by just looking
Yeah,
at
so the LSST surveys are not just covering the sky. They're covering the sky in very specific ways to maximize the science cases. And, for example, when we go to a new piece of the sky, we dither both in X and Y. A whole lot of separate exposures dithered in X and Y randomly. And also we rotate the camera to chop polarization. And we cannot afford to do that if we have to quickly paint 100 square degrees. So that would be timeout for the main survey, and we would just do that, and it would be unconscionable for us not to do that for a very high signal to noise like Logan.
Can I just quickly ask a related question? How quickly can you steer from one portion to, let's say, 180 degrees?
Well, we would never do that.
No, with the target of opportunity. With the target of opportunity.
No, but that's not 180.
Yeah, so we can go several degrees away in about 5 to 7 seconds, depending upon other issues.
Okay. No, I meant across the horizon, right? Or
Azimuthally or something, yeah, okay, fine.
yeah.
But then my second question was about LIGO events, and an interesting astrophysical information is the amount of sub-threshold events that LIGO has discovered. Not false alarm, but sub-threshold. Because if the LIGO horizon now is 80 megaparsec and you see something at 10 signal, you should see on each one of these lower signal, sub-threshold signal, but at up to 300 megaparsec.
Yeah, but the problem is what
No,
Barry
but-
pointed out
but
earlier.
it is-
It's incredibly steep. We hit a
Yeah,
wall.
very
What do you mean
steep.
it's very
I mean, it's
steep?
good for him.
You don't
but
have
we
any,
hit a
you
wall.
don't see
It's-
anything?
No, not
Nothing.
much. I mean,
Then there is a
becomes-
problem. Then there is a problem.
No,
Because
there's
you
not.
should
not
see
a problem.
them.
Our pulsar
No,
rate
no,
is extremely
no,
rapidly.
there is a
That's all.
problem
When
because you should see them.
No.
Because the universe is
Why don't you
producing
wait till we
them.
discuss the
Yeah.
graph?
This
It's
I
just
want
the
to
background,
understand.
the background kills you, isn't that
The-
right?
yeah.
The-
No,
the
yeah.
possibility
but
of.
if your
The
threshold
noise,
is 10
the noise
sigma,
background when you do a
if
coincidence is incredibly steep. It's just, it's.
Secret to noise measure 10 is once per month. 12 is 1 per 10 to the 6 months. It decreases by 3 orders of magnitude for every.
It's because you're doing.
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the noise in LIGO. I'm talking about the astrophysical background.
Yeah.
Where is
Yeah.
the astrophysical background which is sub-threshold?
Well, it gets lost in the false alarms quickly,
I think
so
we should
it's
look at that.
indistinguishable.
Satya, there's,
Right now.
Kip has a hand
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I just, with respect to this, I mean, the binary black holes in O1 paper has exactly that plot. And you know, the estimate is that the O1, the total candidate set in O1 did have probably about 10 black hole mergers. But, you know, there's only the 3 that you can point to and say, and, you know, so a rigorous analysis says there's 7 more hiding in there somewhere, but they're hiding in 10,000 false alarms.
That's
So
the
they can't
problem.
be picked out. But, I mean, the analysis does indicate their presence, but they can't be identified.
So, with the first discovery, the September event, you had the initial error region release, and then after the more detailed parameter estimation, it shifted considerably, and that, for some groups, that affected their follow-up. So, I'm curious what the expectations are for how that will play out with binary neutron star mergers. Will the initial, because we understand in some ways the template's better and just being, we mostly see the chirp. Are those shifts going to be less? Can we trust? I guess it's a question of how much we can trust the initial error regions that are announced, and how much room does an observer have to observe around it to account for possible shifts that will happen after you do the more detailed analysis.
So for 150914, that shift was because the first sky map that we sent out was from one of our burst analyses, and the updated sky map was from one of our CBC analyses. And so the two searches saw slightly different waveforms.
The
And
constraints are different basically on whether you assume that it's as CBC or whether you
Sounds good.
kind of are more permissive of different polarization, arbitrary polarization combinations.
So that that shouldn't, that shift shouldn't be so extreme when you're going from a CBC, localization to a more refined CBC localization.
But there is still some effect of calibration, although we expect that the online calibration will be more similar, like has been mentioned. And in principle, the other parameters, but parameter estimation, for the spins and the waveform.
Is there, I guess they're just asking, is there a way to somehow factor that into the error bar quote? If you said, okay, this was a compact merger that I discovered with a burst search and it gave me this error region, but it actually had these parameters.
Well, the solution we've settled on is that we don't send out burst localizations for sources that are also picked up by CBC pipelines.
Okay.
But this question raises, I mean, in the email that told me what I was supposed to think about, one of the things was how quickly we can provide sky maps in the LSST era. And the one thing I wanted to say there that touches on your question is that our detection analyses are becoming more coherent and more Bayesian and looking more and more like our Markov chain Monte Carlo, and our parameter estimation codes. Everyone wants them to look more and more like a time domain search, and so I think that that by 2020 and certainly by 2022, the distinction between our rapid localization and our final localization will become less and less important because they'll become more and more mathematically similar. Chad, go ahead.
I'll make that point tomorrow.
I think we should. Let's look at that graph first.
Yeah, this is just for the 1509-14. This is the background, and if you remove this event, it's this one. So it drops straight down. If you put all three of those onto the plot, this is basically what we have. These are decades. So you can see that this falls like crazy. So it's a very, very sharp threshold. We're going back, in order to send announcements now, we're going back into this, but we gain almost no events going back in. It's 10% or something. So we're sitting in this region, you get one a month, but it's very easy to set a threshold where it's nothing. And we still get well over, I think you said well over half of the events. If you take
Right,
this as
of the real events.
Of the real events, we can keep
Well
well
over
over half and make the background zilch. It's just the magic of doing this coincidence.
Yeah, there aren't many events between, let's say, 1 sigma and 5 sigma.
Yeah,
That's
right,
the point.
Right. On this parameter, there are the events you change from background to noise in a very, very narrow range.
And this is with just 2 detectors, and it
This
would
is
be
2
even sharper
detectors.
with more.
Yeah. The conclusion is you almost could do this experiment with 1 detector, and 3 isn't going to. You don't need that for. Which we didn't know in advance what you need to get it clean, but this coincidence really drops it down.
That's another thing that LIGO data scientists are getting excited about. In addition to going to 3 detectors, people are now starting to think seriously about how you would detect a signal with just 1 detector.
Right. That's what I was alluding to. Yeah.
If in the future LSST starts finding kilonova without these gravitational wave counterparts, will we be able to go back and pull out a sub-threshold alert? Or is that, do they just come too quickly for that to be feasible?
There's no too quick. I mean, we can do any analysis afterwards.
But it's hard
I don't
to
think that too quick in that context.
On the other hand, if you want to get back here, the noise
grows.
grows so fast that it's hard to pick anything out.
You gain a little by a trigger,
it's
but
almost
not
a black
too much.
wall.
If you had a plot of how the sort of sensitivity depended on the number of detectors, surely the sub-threshold, that the noise goes down like some power, right? Isn't it sort of, at any given time window, it's the sensitivity to the end, isn't it more or less that? You follow what I'm asking, apropos of Stve's question?
Well, I've just interpreted what you've said as the sensitivity for adding a second gravitational wave detector doesn't actually add all that much, in that you're adding the additional detectors to improve the localization, but not to improve your detection
After
efficiency.
2, you mean?
Yes,
After 2, that's what I was
So
saying.
for the same reason,
After 2,
adding
making it
input
steeper
from an
does nothing.
electromagnetic counterpart isn't going to improve things either.
You're not making it steeper, but you move it left or right.
Yeah,
That's how you
exactly.
add. So it does add, it just does not add to how many sub-threshold you have. But it still moves it to the left of this picture. So you gain, you
Except there's
detect more.
not very many events you get.
But it
No, but
depends on
according to
the
Tsvi, there's some really interesting ones.
No, but there is another important part, which is sky coverage. Leo showed you adding more detectors makes our sample more complete.
Oh, sure, absolutely, and you're getting smaller error bars and
Yeah.
so on and so on, but I was just trying to understand this point apropos of Tsvi. And I thought that it would be clear that if you, for a given signal that's weak, if you have, you know, twice as many detectors, you
Yeah,
sort of
we'll be more
win on
sensitive,
the square.
exactly.
That's really-
You will have more detections. You will not have more sub-thresholds.
Why
The number
not?
of, because, so the sub-threshold depends on the slope of that curve, right? Right, so the sub-threshold is.
But I'm saying the
And
slope
there'll
will
be some,
change.
just not, just
Yeah,
very
so
few.
it's very narrow where you would be sub-threshold, right? If you move this to the left, you'll see more stuff here that's really high
The
SNR.
question would be, if you, for example, a signal that was half as big,
Yeah.
for instance, if you're,
Well, that's like this one compared to this one.
Yeah.
The point is, if you can say the gravitational event must have happened within a millisecond, maybe you can then improve it a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, not a lot.
But that
the
also,
problem
that
is,
also
you know,
moves this way, that also moves the curve.
that's the
Yeah.
point.
But it doesn't change the slope.
But so what? If it moves it this
Yeah,
way,
that's great, yeah,
that's.
you want that, yeah, exactly.
It's not
You
going to move
want
very
more.
far.
But no, I disagree with that.
The
I mean,
biggest gain is to gain sensitivity.
Chad, what do you?
Well, I mean, I disagree with that a little. Yeah, I agree. If we can make the detectors way more sensitive, that's the win. But I mean, from a data analysis perspective, if we work hard enough to analyze the detector network coherently, we should be able to get at least a factor of 2 in event rate, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're talking about events that could be rare, where you might have 1 observation per our lifetime or not.
You can gain a factor of 2 in event rate if
Yeah, I think if we do the best possible job to analyze the full network coherently, there is at least a factor of 2 play there from an analysis perspective, independently.
the full network of 5 detectors or these 2?
No, these 2 we saturated.
That's right,
Yeah,
okay.
these 2 we
So you're
saturated.
talking about when we had the
When we had
rest.
more, yes, yes.
Yeah,
That's what I was talking
I
about.
agree with you.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about.
Actually, my question is the following. This was supposed to be a sub-threshold event.
Well,
It was at least initially was announced as a sub-threshold event, which was not a bona fide detection, and it is announced because it is the properties are so similar to the others. So
Yeah, that's
this
all-
was the
that's
initial.
all words. At
This was
At this point, we
yes.
don't declare an event
Okay.
unless it's 5 sigma. It's just that simple.
Okay, so why only one event here?
This is the expected shape, so we're not so different from that.
That's the astrophysical
Well, this is a
population
fit
that
to
we
the
should have. The
shape
brown
that we-
band there is the expected population. And we are more or less on that curve at the moment. I think
what-
your question is, why have we not detected more events of the type LVT 15, 10, 12?
This is exactly my question. Why
Yeah.
only one and not 10?
You can,
This is
so
the,
that
this
comes
is
from-
the question. Very
Yeah.
simple question.
Yeah.
Why only
it
one?
comes from synchronized ratios between 10 and 12.
This is showing
This is
that
weaker
it's
because
very
it's twice as
reasonable
far
to
away.
just. This is
Yeah.
showing that, given the signal model, the signal of a population, it is reasonable just to have detected one of those above the background. The other ones are in that green curve there, but they're not individually identifiable because they're underneath the background. But anyway, this is exactly, addresses your question. Given the distribution of amplitudes from the population, it is reasonable to have detected just one of those with this data set.
So another way of saying it is, if you take events in this region from here to here, that comes from a very small annular region which has a very low probability, low probability of seeing. So we have one event that's completely consistent with having seen only one event in O.
Well, the main thing, that one event is twice as far away as this one.
Yeah.
So is that one event claimed to be real now, or?
No, that's why it has an L here.
Yeah, it looks on this figure that it's way above the background.
But not 5 sigma.
2 sigma. I don't show it on this plot, but this is 2 sigma. So it's 90%.
So Tsvi, if we were
It's
to
probably
announce
real.
smaller
Yeah.
significance events,
I
where
mean,
would
there
you
are
draw
no
the
Higgs
line?
events that are better than that.
What would you want to know?
Chad, you should comment about LVT10,
No, it's-
1510, even unofficially. In the sense that what can improve analysis do.
Yes. What does he want you to say?
I don't know. I mean, the diffusion collaboration statement is what everyone said, right?
Yeah.
This is a 2 sigma event. I mean, I think if you talk to most of us and asked us if this were real, if we have other quantitative evidence that it is, we would say yes.
Yeah, exactly.
The collaboration's position is pretty accurate, 3%.
Yeah, that's true. That gives point perfect. So yes.
The signal model is favored.
Yes. Exactly, yeah. So we do something better than false alarm rate, which is what Kim's point is. We actually compute a Piastre for this. And that's already strongly favored.
That's what I mean. So
What's a piastre?
It's instead of actually just saying false alarm rate, which has nothing to do with whether or not the thing is actually astrophysical, it's just how often this happens in noise. This folds into the fact that we have this prior set of observations to determine that signal model. So when you look at that signal model, you say, oh my goodness, it lies on that perfectly. And so like the quantification of that statement is sort of wrapped up in this term we call Piastre.
So
Basically,
Can you explain how the signal model is calculated?
Oh, it's just estimating the rate from all of the triggers that we
the signal
found.
model is basically consistent with rho to the -4, which is what you expect from an isotropic distribution.
You're assuming a homogeneous population.
Assuming a
Yeah,
homogeneous
assume some
population.
homogeneous population here.
And rho to the -4, and I know that that's not rho, but rho to the -4, SNR to the -4 is what you get for an isotropic homogeneous distribution, which is a perfectly reasonable assumption that this close in the universe would have a redshift point.
So I'm very sorry to say, but that we have to move on, unfortunately. There's a lot of questions.
is that,
Yes.
I mean, are we still in the discussion thing?
The next one is not going to be discussion, then we're coming back for discussion, but a different one. Okay, sorry.
Because I wanted to, this will come up, I'm sure, but what are the timescales that are important for LSST follow-ups? Like how quickly do we need to get events out and things like that? But
Yeah, there are a lot of things that we didn't have time for,
So
unfortunately.
we can talk a little bit
But
about
there are
the
more
event
discussions.
characteristics.
Yeah.
I don't know, you can get through it.